For the last few falls in a row, probably 3 or 4, my best friend and I, Blake, have made a trip to Iowa reservoirs in order to do some fall bass fishing. So this video kind of documents our trip from this year. It was pretty darn good. We caught quite a few fish, mostly wipers, but as you'll see later in the video, we also got into some pretty good largemouth this day. In this first clip, I believe you see me catch the first wiper of the day pretty early. Blake usually brings his dog Ringo along, and he's always interested and ready to catch fish. So the more fish we catch, the happier Ringo is, and we like to keep Ringo happy. As you can tell, the wind and the waves were pretty intense this particular day. Blake has a lot of good spots on the opposite side of the lake, and we were doing our best to hold on those spots, but we found out early in the morning that that was not necessarily the case, and that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. So here what you see is Blake hooked up with a big wiper and telling me to get on the big motor on the boat, because we know that if Blake steps off the trolling motor to either net the fish or land the fish, and I'm not on the big motor, then the boat is going to blow up onto shore and we're going to be beached. So I hop on the big motor while Blake's kind of fighting the fish and telling me which way to drive and which way to go. It was kind of a bit of a confusing sequence here, as we were both trying to figure out how to get this fish in the boat, me driving the boat and Blake trying to net the fish and keep the boat in position. But we got the fish in regardless. And it was a pretty darn good wiper, especially on that spot. We were pretty happy, and Ringo was happy. So we continued to fish on that spot to see if we could catch some more like that. Unfortunately, we realized that holding there was going to be next to impossible in the wind and the waves. Here you can see me. I just lost one right at the boat. Unfortunately, that sometimes happens. They pull so hard that sometimes if you don't get a good hook set, they pull right off. Blake's hooked up here again with another one, but this one's not very big. I believe in this clip we ran back across the lake because we just could not hold in those waves any longer. Essentially, this is our third spot for the day. Here you see me, after Blake caught that little one, I am hooked up with another one. We tried to make it work so that way we could both be on the front of the deck and both be fishing at the same time, so then the camera would be on us both. But it didn't really work out that way, just mostly because the wind and the waves were so strong that it was really difficult to keep the boat in position, and then it was really difficult for me not to be falling off the front deck with the wind and the waves, just bashing the side of the boat. Here it's not as big of a deal, but at that first spot I about got thrown in once or twice. So I learned quickly that I should just go to the back deck, and if I get hooked up with a good one, I can just come up front to fight it. But this was my first good one for the day. Pretty solid fish. Turns out that wiper actually tastes pretty good. We kept a couple of them to eat that day. Obviously we caught a lot, but I think we only kept 5 or 6 to actually keep and eat. There's no point in my mind of keeping fish to excess just because you can. I mean, that's a resource just like any other, and you should put that resource back in the lake and kind of thank the lake for giving you those fish in a way. I realize I kind of sound like a hippie saying that, but I'm okay with it. Here I'm hooked up again with another good one. As you can tell, they just kind of go wherever they want, and they fight really hard. I would compare the way that these fish fight to a smallmouth. It's very, very similar. Their body structure is very similar. They're very wide. They're very wide, tall fish, and if they get fairly large and get some shoulders on them, I mean, it's almost the exact same thing. but it's pretty fun to be catching fish on such regular intervals that are fighting that hard and school up as much as these do. Needless to say, my spinnerbait at the end of the day was pretty much destroyed from these fish. I think you'll probably see that same spinnerbait in a later video, but I realized in filming that later video that I think I need to cache that spinnerbait because the one blade is hardly even spinning. Of the two willow leafs, the first willow leaf blade hardly even spins anymore, and it's pretty much just because all of these wipers just destroyed the wire of the spinnerbait, which is fine. I mean, that's what we buy baits for. We buy them in order to use them. There's no point in having a bait sit on a shelf or in your tackle box the whole time if you're never even going to use it. So this was a pretty big wiper, definitely one of the bigger ones we caught that day, and that's why here I'm gonna let it go, because it's just, to me, keeping big fish isn't necessarily fair to the big fish. Like, they make one mistake, and I don't think it's necessarily fair that a lot of people throw that big one in the live well. I think, if anything, the big ones need to go back and put those genetics back in the water. Although that's not necessarily true for hybrid striped bass, because those are the ones that are stocked by the DNR. But regardless, in the context of native fish, the big ones are definitely the ones that need to go back, because those are the genetics that you want in that body of water, reproducing fish every single year in order to keep good fish like that one in the lake itself. So we are just absolutely destroying the wipers right here on this spot and having just a good time. Ringo's having a good time. He's happy. We're catching fish, keeping a few, but definitely no complaints here. We're just having a good time fishing and not necessarily fighting the wind nearly as much on this spot, which is good. Blake's hooked up again with another good one. I mean, it for a while there was just about every cast. As soon as you could get one off and whip the spinnerbait back over the spot, or whip your bait over the spot, they were just on it, just absolutely on it, and it was so much fun. But I wanted to hold on to this one because Blake was hooked up at the same time as me, so we wanted to make sure that we got a double at least once today, as instead of both of us filling with fish and getting them off as quickly as we could to get back out there to get another one from the school. We thought it would be cool if we could find a way to get a double shot. So fortunately, we were in a spot where the wind wasn't too bad, and we both kind of just happened to have one at the same time. So quick little wiper double, and I think both of these, since they were fairly medium-sized fish, went into the live well to eat. Also, something that we found out that day is wiper aren't necessarily the most hardy fish in the live well, especially if there's a lot of wind and the wind is really banging the fish around in the live well. They don't tend to last very long at all. So you can see Blake hooked up here with another good wiper. I mean, they're just tons of fun to catch. We fished for probably an hour and a half on this particular spot throughout the morning, and we tried some others, but although once we did leave this spot, we never did come back. The weather started taking a turn right around noon, and we were just like, it's probably not worth it to be on the water if it's going to start storming. As you can tell, the clouds are moving about 100 miles an hour up there, and the weather was just really, really tumultuous for most of the day. We fought 30-mile-an-hour winds. We fought rain. Fortunately, no lightning or anything like that, which is good. But you definitely, no fish is worth being on the water if the weather's going to turn nasty on you. And Blake here with another good wiper. I mean, we caught so many of them that day. I honestly don't think even if we would have kept them all, that his live wells would have been big enough to hold them. I mean, we caught that many, and it was a lot of fun. What you see in this video isn't even necessarily every fish that we caught on that day. I mean, you get a good glimpse of most of them, but even later in the day, once we got into the largemouth, Blake was catching wipers, smaller ones on some of these largemouth spots that I didn't even edit into the footage because, it's not really worth anyone's time to watch those. I mean, I'm sure he had fun catching them, but at the same time, I'm not going to make a video run for 40 minutes to show an extra 20 13-inch wipers. I mean, then ain't nobody got time for that. But here we have me getting another really good wiper into the boat here. As you can see, I struggled a little bit with the net and stuff, but this is probably the best one that I caught that day. I mean, this thing is fat, it is long, and just a beautiful fish. And Ringo was pretty happy about it. He wanted to hang out with it a little bit more, I guess, but he's having a good time. So we moved spots again, probably down the lake a little bit. Blake hooking up with a good one here. Me being a good fishing buddy, I'm always quick on the net to make sure that we can get that fish in the boat as quickly as possible. Blake's got a good one here, ready for the quick scoop and into the boat. Another good wiper for him. And back in the water. I guess this one I didn't even decide to come up to the front of the boat for. Blake was just going to net it for me in the back. So that was nice of him to do. But he's got to get back on the trolling motor so that way we can stay on the spot and keep fishing and not worry about getting blown onto the spot or off of it, however you would want to say it, I guess. Another quality wiper, just lots of fun. So here we're kind of transitioning to what I think is the largemouth portion of this particular day. We didn't catch a lot of largemouth on the res, but the ones that we caught were the right ones, and Blake spends a lot of time here, so he knows how to get on the good fish. So right here is just an excellent fish by Blake on one of his spots. It's always really cool going out to the res with Blake and being able to catch these big ones on open spots and open water. There's nothing cooler than that in bass fishing than going out somewhere that not a lot of people know about, and maybe no one even knows about it, and fishing for those fish. Of course, with these big ones like this, you gotta get the scale out and get a weight on them. Fortunately, with it being fairly cold out that day, you don't have to worry as much about the fish being out of water. I mean, obviously, if you're holding the fish out of water for 10 minutes, that's not good. But, a couple minutes here to weigh the fish isn't going to bother the fish all that much, especially with those water temps dropping. Those fish will swim off just fine. So Blake's getting a quick weight on his fish. As you can see, that belly is just absolutely full of shad from the lake itself. I believe when it was all said and done, I think that one was 5.25 or just under 5.25. Just an absolutely beautiful reservoir bass right there. Blake was pretty tickled. And really, when you come out to the res, that's about all you can ask for. Usually we get some good wipers, and, if we run into a couple good largemouth, that's pretty sweet too. So here we were kind of fishing another spot that Blake really likes, and I happened to pick up my number one confidence bait, just a soft plastic Texas rig, and ran into a good one here. Bass fishing this season hasn't been exceptional for me. I mean, I've had some good days on the water, but I haven't really caught any giants. I think the biggest one that I've caught this year has maybe been 4.5 pounds. So this one is right up there. After we got it weighed and all things were said and done, I think this one was just a hair over 4, which is cool. I mean, we were pretty stoked to have been able to catch some fish and been able to not only chase the wipers like we intended, but also get on some largemouth like we were hoping. And all in all, you can't really ask for more than that on this particular body of water. I mean, Blake and I were pretty happy with the way that the day shaped up, especially considering most of the day we were fighting 30-mile-an-hour winds and rain. You can see we both have our rain gear on at this point in time. And, being that the weather isn't all that cooperative, this one came in a place that was a little more tucked away, but at the same time, it's not like it wasn't cold. It's not like it wasn't raining there. But anyway, happy to have the 4-pounder, and of course going to let her go. If you're wondering why we weigh these fish, it's kind of like to simulate a tournament. So when Blake and I fish together, or even by ourselves, a lot of times, we'll try and think about, okay, what are our best 5 fish? What would our best 5 bass weigh? What putting these fish together, how would it shape itself up for a tournament? How long did we spend on the water getting these fish? And then Blake usually has like a marker board or something to kind of record these fish on. Although, I take that back. I believe he can record it on the scale now itself. But here Blake has another good one, another one that's well over 4, and it's just a lot of fun being able to run into those plus size fish. On this particular body of water, you don't run into a lot of largemouth. It's just how the body of water sets up. But the ones that you do run into tend to be the right ones. Finding them isn't always necessarily the easiest thing in the world, but when you do find them and you're rewarded with a 5-pounder or a 4-pounder or even maybe a 6-pounder, like, that's some of the best feelings in the world when you're able to put a pattern together, when you're able to go out and get on the fish. This one was not nearly as cooperative with Blake as the others. He liked to shake, and he would not stop moving his tail, so that way we couldn't get a total accurate weight on him. I think we did eventually, and like I said, I think he was just over 4, which is good. But again, like I said before too, you want to make sure you get them in the water as quick as possible, but sometimes the fish don't always cooperate with you there. Now, the reason I am laughing here so hard is because that particular fish, when Blake tried to let it go, it grabbed onto his thumb as he went to throw it over the board, over the boat. So not only did it kind of yank on his arm, but it skinned his thumb clear down his thumb. It was skinned up from that fish latching on. Tons of fun. It was a great day on the water, minus the ride back, which was, needless to say, a little bumpy.